Hey guys, this is Kathy Gold. I'm so happy that you're here today and that you're taking some time to watch this. I'm going to do my best to keep it from being too lengthy or too scientific, but to still give you the information that you need. This is the first of several nutrition talks coming up, and understanding the basics in today's talk is going to be really important in order for you to understand the next few times that we come together. Some of this might be information you've already heard before, but go through the whole talk because there's a whole lot of new stuff out there in nutrition science, and there's so much misinformation in the world. So I want to talk through some of those things and talk a little about making changes based on your new knowledge. So today we're going to go over a basic overview of what exactly we mean by the word nutrition and why that matters. We'll learn which macronutrients or what macronutrients are. We also call them macros, and what foods are best for you in each type of macronutrient. We're going to go over some myths and maybe some urban legends that are out there about nutrition, as well as the factual scientific truths that counter each myth. And then, of course, we're going to touch a little bit on making nutritional changes in your lifestyle and how to go about doing that. Okay, so the word nutrition is thrown around all the time, but what exactly does it mean? Well, the dictionary definition is the process of providing the food necessary for health and growth. So it really means food, the food you eat, or nourishment for your body. Historically speaking, it's meant the food you eat, but also has some components of pleasure and enjoyment over time. The food they ate 1,000 years ago is now more palatable, more enjoyable, because human beings want it to be. We've changed things, we've changed what we mean by nutrition. And then we come to what society thinks nutrition is, and most people think good nutrition means dietary restriction, dull, boring, tasteless food, and a sad, sad life. The problem in modern times is learning to balance nourishment for the body with the very real need to enjoy your food and to fit in with society, but also maintain a healthy body weight and limit our food related disease risks. So, for our purposes, we want to consider all of those factors: nourishing the body, preventing disease, maintaining a healthy body weight, and social acceptance. Thomas Edison once said, "The doctor of the future will no longer treat the human frame with drugs, but rather will cure and prevent disease with nutrition." Ha, if only we'd listened, huh? No one even argues anymore that proper nutrition can prevent almost every disease on the planet. In addition, changes in diet can even reverse the problems we're already having or symptoms some of us feel. Think about it. When a dog gets sick, the first thing the vet does is say, "What's he eating?" And then he says, "We need to change his diet." So we all go out and buy the most expensive food. We don't even think about it. So why do we fight the fact that the same is true in human beings? It's all about our food. Before we can talk more in detail about weight loss or disease prevention and all the stuff that's coming down the pike, we have to have a basic understanding of the science of nutrition. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. In doing that, I do risk oversimplifying things, which can cause a little confusion. So if anything doesn't make sense, write it down and ask me. So, macronutrients, what makes up the food we eat? Most of you have heard the terms carbohydrate, protein, fat, vitamins, minerals, things like that. From a science standpoint, the parts of food that give us energy are called macronutrients. And then the smaller, more detailed things within the food that help us function more optimally are called micronutrients. Micronutrients are things like vitamins, minerals, trace elements, fiber, water. We're not going to talk a whole lot about them today. We're going to focus on the basics, the macros, because the fact is, if your macronutrients are out of whack, your micronutrients barely even matter. Who cares if you're getting all the vitamins and minerals you need if you're eating way too much food in the wrong portions? Macronutrients or macros are carbohydrates, protein, fat, and alcohol. Those contain energy, which we measure in a unit called a calorie. Different macros have different properties, different calorie totals, different benefits, and different problems associated with them. So we're going to dive into that a little bit right now. Carbohydrates, or carbs, are the buzzword of the century, I know, but there's a ton of confusion and misinformation about carbs. You hear things like good carbs and bad carbs and low carb and no carb and blah, blah, blah till your head explodes. I'm going to clear some of that up for you. First of all, carbohydrate rich foods include bread, grains, legumes, fruits, vegetables, sweets. So when people say carbs are bread, they're wrong. Carbs are a lot more than just bread. And when people say bad carbs are bread and candy, they're wrong too. Carbs are the body's primary source of energy. It doesn't matter if it's bread or fruit or a vegetable, every gram of carbohydrate contains 4 calories. When you eat carbs, they are converted almost immediately in the body into a substance called glucose. That's blood sugar. You may have heard that before. This increase in blood sugar triggers the hormone insulin to be released in order for the body to use that glucose to bring it into the cells that need it. Some of this glucose is used immediately by the body, but only about a teaspoon or 4 grams of blood sugar is circulating in the body at any given moment. The rest of it is converted to glycogen, which can be stored. A little bit of it gets stored in the organs and muscle for later use, if there's room for it. But the rest of it is stored as fat in the fat cells on your body. That's right, we don't store it as sugar, we store it as fat. It's the only way the body can do that. Now, there are people who eat a lot of carbs and don't get overweight. Scientists don't really know why that is yet, but here's what we do know. Those people are not immune from the effects of a high sugar diet or a high carb diet. They're experiencing diabetes and heart disease at the same rates as obese people. It's because all that glucose, the blood sugar, is being shoved into the organs. It's destroying their arteries, it's increasing insulin and all the other hormones and a bunch of other effects. The bottom line is that even though they're not showing the outward signs, obesity, they're not healthy on the inside. So instead of being envious of your friend who can eat whatever they want and not gain weight, feel sorry for them. They don't have the motivation that we all have looking in the mirror every day to make some life changes. So let's think for just a second. Your body can use 4 grams of carbohydrate at a time, blood sugar. The rest is stored, mostly as fat. So, when you eat something that contains 25 grams of carbohydrate, that's converted to about 6 teaspoons of blood sugar. Does it matter whether that 6 teaspoons came from Ezekiel bread or a Snickers bar? Nope. It has the exact same effect on your blood sugar, the same effect on your insulin levels, the same amount of sugar converted to glucagon, and the same amount of fat stored on your body. Now, obviously, it's, quote, healthier to eat a whole grain than a Snickers bar, but then you're talking about micronutrients. We're not talking about that. We're sticking with macros. The same amount of blood sugar effect, the same amount of insulin effect, doesn't matter where that carbohydrate source came from. Interesting to note here is that there are no essential carbohydrates that we must eat in order to live. It's the only macronutrient that's non-essential. Our body can make glucose from protein, and our body can get energy from either proteins or fats. There absolutely are essential proteins and fats that we cannot survive without, but there is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. I want you to just tuck that away for now, and we'll get to it later. So, take a deep breath. What are the best sources of carbohydrates? Well, a lot has to do with fiber and the role insulin plays, and some other hormones in the body. And we're keeping it simple, remember? The best sources won't cause a huge spike in blood sugar. That's also called the glycemic index, and therefore won't cause all the cascades of hormones to go crazy either. So those are things like greens, cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus, Brussels sprouts. And in the fruit family, we're talking about berries, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, strawberries, all amazing sources of carbohydrate and fiber. Our next group are the okay or acceptable sources, but definitely in the be careful category because they cause a much higher sugar load. and all of the corresponding hormonal chaos that can come along with that. That would include most fruits, most root vegetables, carrots, potatoes, the legumes, and whole grains. Then, of course, there's the worst group, the poor sources of carbohydrate. Yeah, they have a ton of carbohydrate, but they also wreak havoc on the body. Dried fruits, most of the grains, and of course, the highly processed packaged foods that make up most of the standard American diet. These foods also cause addiction like symptoms because your body wants the high sugar over and over again. In fact, food manufacturers know this and have formulated their products to make your body want more and more. Here's why. When we eat foods that cause our blood sugar to spike up, then our bodies release insulin to combat that and lower the blood sugar level. But then we dip lower than we're used to, so we feel hungry. So we eat again, and the cycle continues. What's worse is that during that time, all that sugar doesn't just float around in your body. No, that insulin is working hard to store it all as fat on your body. As a side note, this is what happens to us in prediabetes or metabolic syndrome. The body gets so used to insulin being around all the time because of the carbohydrates constantly present in the body that it stops doing its job. That's what insulin resistance is. When you eat only the best sources of carbohydrate, your blood sugar, insulin, and other hormones steady off. You're not hungry all the time, you're not storing fat, and you're eating less total food in the day. Okay, time for another deep breath. Most of the science is over. There's hope. Remember, we don't have a physiological need for carbohydrates. They're not essential. Proteins are the next macronutrient we want to talk about. Proteins are contained in foods like meat, fish, poultry, eggs, and there's some in legumes, cheeses, and nuts. Proteins have about 4 calories per gram, just like carbohydrates do. But they only affect the insulin response by about 50%. That means a certain amount of protein grams will cause insulin levels to rise about half what the same amount of carbohydrate grams would cause it to rise. Proteins can be converted in the body to glucagon and used for energy, stored in the muscle for later use, or stored as fat when they're eaten in excess. But proteins are made up of smaller parts called amino acids, and these absolutely are essential to life. Your body cannot make them. You must get them from the foods you eat. They repair muscles and organs and other tissues in the body, and they help maintain our muscle mass. There's a lot of confusion about protein sources, just like with carbs. The very best sources are grass-fed, free-range, or cage-free animals, plus wild-caught fish or shellfish. It's more natural. It contains less harmful chemicals. They're free from the hormones and antibiotics fed from mainstream animals. And if you're eating a lot of grain-fed meat, then you're also eating a lot of grains. You're eating what the animal eats. But it is expensive to eat a lot of free range or grass-fed animal products. And a lot of people don't have access to that. So it's good to just do your best. It's totally okay to eat traditionally raised animal products as well as plant-based foods like lentils, some of the quinoas, and nuts. We want to do the best we can. The proteins we want to stay away from are the highly processed ones: hot dogs, processed deli meats, canned meats, cheese-like products. What about dairy? There's definitely protein in a lot of dairy products, but there's also a lot of carbohydrate, and lactose is not a fat-friendly sugar source. There's a ton of other reasons to avoid dairy. In almost all adults, it increases the inflammatory markers in the body, which are a huge reason many people can't lose weight. It's full of hormones and antibiotics, which is not something we should be putting into our bodies. So here's a cool little picture that'll show you how the protein is converted to glucose differently from the carbohydrate. Look how high that red line is. That's carbohydrates in relation to the green line, which is proteins. This is time it takes for your food to be converted into glucose and how high that sugar, blood sugar goes based on the foods you eat. That's why when you get enough protein in a meal, you're full for longer and you don't get the slumps from a higher carbohydrate diet. But wait, what's that little yellow line? That's pretty interesting. It's dietary fat, and it's what we're going to talk about next. So, fats have long been the scapegoat for obesity epidemic and almost every disease on the planet. Over the past 30 years, nutrition science has learned the complete opposite is true. And experts have been trying to fight the idea that fat is bad ever since. But it's still ingrained in the public eye. Why is a whole nother talk. And we can chat on the side sometime if you like. But remember, it took 70 years for people to accept that cigarettes were bad because the tobacco industry kept telling us they weren't, and everyone knew someone who was healthy even though they smoked. But anyway, back on the topic. Fats are things like oils, butters, creams, lard, and it's contained in a lot of cheeses, well, all cheeses, nuts, and some plants like avocados and olives. Fats are the most energy dense macronutrient. They have 9 calories per gram. Carbs and protein have 4, remember. This is why the flawed calorie model always recommended lower fat. But haven't we tried and failed at calorie balance? Fat has almost no effect on blood sugar. Remember that shallow yellow line? And no effect on insulin levels. So, in terms of jacking up your hormones, fat is the only nutrient that doesn't do that. Of course, if you eat too much fat, you'll store it as fat in the body. That's true of all the macronutrients. But here's what's interesting. In the absence of carbohydrate, the body can use all fat as a source of fuel. That means your body can function quite well on a diet higher in fat as long as the carbs are super low. We're going to dive deeper into that in the next talk. So, what are the best sources of fats? Well, believe it or not, that's actually one of the hottest topics in nutrition science right now. There are several kinds of fats. Saturated fats are solid at room temperature. Usually they come in from animal sources, butter, lard, that marbling that's in your meat. There is some evidence to suggest that saturated fats can raise your LDL, the so-called bad cholesterol. But newer science over the past 10 years or so is suggesting that that doesn't even matter. That LDL has subparticles and that there's a good LDL and a bad LDL, and it's so much information that makes your brain hurts. But the idea is saturated fats look like they're not the culprit after all, that perhaps they raise the good LDL. Unsaturated fats are mostly plant-based and are liquid at room temperature, your oils. And these raise HDLs, the so-called good cholesterol. But not all plant oils do that. So things like corn oil, vegetable oil, canola oil, soybean oil, and the like are thought to cause more harm and should be limited. No one argues that trans fats are horrible. They're processed. They're things that man created. They don't occur in nature. They're present in all the processed foods and the awful low-fat products on the market. Does anyone remember Olestra? They don't occur in nature. They wreak havoc on the body and are almost solely to blame for the rise in bad cholesterol people have seen over the last few decades. When margarine was introduced, nothing but 100% pure trans fat, heart disease rates skyrocketed. Now, this topic could be discussed for hours, but here's the basic fact. Back in the 1960s and 1970s, there was some research going on trying to figure out why we were seeing an increase in heart attacks. One doctor in one study, his name is Ansel Keys, found that people who had heart attacks also had high levels of cholesterol in their blood. So he hypothesized that it was the cause of heart attacks. He published his opinion and the government latched onto it. Now, over the past 40 years, we've learned a ton. There is a lot more going on with cholesterol than we ever knew about in the 70s. There are more types than we knew of even 10 years ago. And there has never been a single solitary scientific study to show that cholesterol causes heart disease or anything else. In addition, the fat we eat doesn't necessarily contribute to our cholesterol levels. In fact, we now know that cholesterol is made in the body to combat the effects of, drumroll, a diet high in sugar. So, the word is slowly but surely getting out that dietary fat is not only not bad, it's actually a good thing to eat. In fact, without any media attention at all, the 2015 guidelines for healthy eating stopped recommending low-fat diet for the first time since they started issuing guidelines. But they didn't tell us that directly because then they'd have to admit they were wrong. And they'd lose a lot of their food industry corporate sponsors. Again, a topic for you to research on your free time and one that I promise will make you mad. Okay, so just worth mentioning, macronutrients give us energy. They're carbs, protein, and fats, but it's also one more, alcohol. Alcohol contains 7 calories per gram, regardless of the type. So the rumors that vodka has no calories are false. Vodka has no sugar, but that doesn't mean it's a free-for-all. Beer is made from grains. There's a huge carb load. In fact, a lot of people refer to it as liquid bread. Wine is made from fruits, and most have a pretty high sugar content because of that. Both will raise blood sugar and insulin levels. Hard liquor is made from lots of different substances, cane sugar, grain, fruits, but the process of distillation removes most of the carbohydrate. This concentrates the alcohol, which is why hard liquors have a greater percentage of alcohol than beers and wines. Now, this is why I'm including this. The body must metabolize alcohol, calories, before it can get back to metabolizing anything else. The liver is busy, all tied up with getting rid of that toxin of alcohol from your body. So it can't do anything but store the carbohydrate, protein, and fat you eat. And it's stored as fat on your body. So the result is a 100% stall in fat burning for those trying to lose weight, and a 100% storing of all the nutrients consumed immediately before and during the time that alcohol is present in your body. In addition, there are things to think about, like added sugar from mixers, the increase in food cravings while you're drinking, loss of inhibitions, meaning you lose your give a damn factor, and you're less likely to stick to your plan of eating while you're drinking. Then, of course, there's concern related to dependency and addiction. The bottom line is that alcohol is really bad for anyone trying not to put on body fat, especially for those trying to lose weight. Okay, one more thing worth pointing out. Many foods contain a combination of macronutrients. For example, protein plus fat is seen in eggs and cheese and red meat and dark meat poultry, like the chicken legs and chicken thighs. Protein plus fat plus carbs we see in nuts and milk, most dairies actually, and then your lentils and your legumes. But nowhere in nature do we find carbohydrates and fat together. These only come together in man-made processed crap like chips and queso. Cookies, cake, brownies, all your baked goods, Cheetos, Doritos, even Sun Chips, right? That's nothing but carbs and fat. None of that's natural. So this combination is deadly. It's the number one reason we're seeing an enormous rise in obesity, diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's, immune disorders, and many, many other diseases. Plus chronic pain, arthritis, migraines, and dozens of other symptoms. Our bodies are trying to tell us something's wrong. We're putting fuel, energy in our bodies that doesn't occur in nature. And the food industry knows that the combination of high fat and high carbohydrate is the magic bullet for food sales. Just like the tobacco industry manipulated nicotine levels to get you addicted, the food industry manipulates the content of sugar and fat in foods to make you want more and more. McDonald's adds sugar to a hamburger. Just let that sit. Linus Pauling once said good nutrition will prevent 95% of all diseases. Linus Pauling did most of his work in the mid 20th century, and even then, he knew that the food we choose to eat is the answer to everything. So let's talk about some myths and some facts. The first myth I want to go over: a low-fat diet will help you lose weight. Raise your hand if you've tried it. Raise your hand if it worked. Raise your hand if it stayed off. The fact is, obesity rates have skyrocketed since the quote low fat recommendation. It's not the fat making us fat, it's the sugar. The next one is that dietary fat is bad for your heart. It'll raise your cholesterol. The fact is that dietary fat has absolutely nothing to do with blood cholesterol levels, and blood cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease. There's a lot we still need to learn there, but it's something we got to start letting sink in. Next one is margarine is healthier than butter. No, it's a fake fat. And fake fats, trans fats, and plant oils are the worst fats. They increase the bad cholesterol. They make us sick. How about this one? Complex carbohydrates are healthy, and you should eat 9 to 11, or I think one of the guidelines says 6 to 8 servings per day. So false. Sugar, blood glucose, and the resulting inflammation are the cause of most disease and adverse symptoms in our culture. How about this? You have to eat less calories than you burn in order to lose weight. Who's tried that one? The fact is, the insulin response and the resulting hormonal cascade is critical to weight loss. The calorie model has been debunked for years. It certainly doesn't work. It'd be too easy if it did. And then finally, meat is bad for you, especially red meat. Heard that one, haven't you? Nope. Animal products contain essential fatty acids and amino acids. In fact, a diet rich in various meats and animal products gives you all of the vitamins, minerals, micronutrients, and macronutrients that you need for survival. And then perhaps the number one myth is something I hear every single day. You guys don't think you can stop eating carbs or even lower them. You've tried many times and the cravings are overwhelming. But the fact is, you crave what you eat. Once you stop, the cravings die down. Sugar addiction is very, very real. The other half of this myth is that small little changes are more sustainable and better than a cold turkey approach. This is totally false according to research. Most people will fail when small steps are made if the problem is physical or psychological addiction. And here's why. The perpetual cycle of sugar addiction. The more you eat, the more the blood sugar rises. And then it drops quickly because insulin is doing its job. So you feel like crap and you crave more to get that high again, to feel better. It's never ending. You eat the sugar, you like it. The blood sugar levels spike, everything goes up, and then it drops, and you feel tired, and you feel hungry, and the cravings start to hit, and you can't stand it anymore, so you give and you eat more sugar. And around we go. You would never tell a crack addict to have just a little less every day. Just something to think about. So, just a reminder that just because I'm saying the word sugar doesn't mean I'm talking about the white stuff in the bowl on the counter, or that I mean junk food. Remember that all carbohydrates are converted immediately to blood glucose, no matter what the source of that carbohydrate is. Added sugar, Natural sugars, whole grains, all of it is treated the same in your body. Remember, we can only use about a teaspoon at a time. That's 4 grams. The rest is stored as fat on your body. So, what do we do with this newfound knowledge? Well, that depends on your personal starting point. The word diet here refers to the foods you eat on a regular basis. It's not something you go on and go off. It's critical that you're honest with yourself about what your diet is. Often it's based on a framework like the food pyramid or the paleo or vegetarian. There's many of them. But be honest with what you're currently doing and what you're willing to do different. After all, the last thing anyone needs is one more failed attempt at changing their food, right? But very often there's nothing organizing the foods you eat. You're just flying by the seat of your pants, eating what you want, when you want to, how much you feel like. You're driven totally by taste, desire, convenience, and social acceptance. There's nothing at all wrong with that either. But you have to accept the consequences that comes along with that decision. Recognize that change is hard, but not impossible. You find anyone that's made a lifestyle change and ask them if they regret it. Do you know anyone who eats a really healthy diet and has maybe lost weight or maybe just feels better and they wish they hadn't? Your first step is to be honest with yourself about where you are, where you want to be, and why. And you have to believe you can make the change. Don't even say things like, I'll try. That's an immediate indication that you're not going to do whatever it takes because you already have an out. You can say, yeah, well, at least I tried. That's not good enough. You have to do it, not try to do it. Your plan needs to consider things that'll get in your way. Family obligations and customs, traveling, social pressures, things like that. What will you do when someone brings cookies to the office? When mom bakes you a cake? When it's your child's birthday and you always go out for pizza? Remember, you're an adult. No one can make you eat something you don't want to eat. If you eat it, it's on you. Finally, I'll say again, you need to be totally honest with yourself. No excuses, no rationalizing. You aren't any different than anyone else. Until you recognize that, everything else is an excuse. So, what's next? You should sit down, take some time, a blank sheet of paper. What is your personal dietary framework? Do you think I eat mostly paleo, or I follow the food pyramid, or I would like to be vegetarian? What is your framework? What kind of encompasses how you think of food and how you want to think of food? And what are your biases around that? Are you just not buying the whole fat's not bad for you thing and I need to eat low fat? Okay, write it down. What's your level of commitment? Do you want to make a little change and see how it goes? Or are you ready to do the cold turkey thing? Are you willing to do whatever it takes to reach your goals? Or do you have a line? There's no right answer. If you have a line that you're not going to cross, I'm not giving up this or I'm not giving up that, that's okay, but you need to be aware of it. What are your goals? Is it just weight loss? Is it to feel better? Is it to avoid the family diseases that run in your family? Is it to not be like your mom? Is it to set a good example for your kids? What are your barriers? Work, school, kids, husbands, that mental block in your head. I can't give up wine. And what are you willing to change? If you're not willing to change anything, that's okay. But again, you have to accept the consequences. What are you willing to change? Change your breakfast? Change your lunch? Change everything? Take some time. Answer the questions. This is my simple steps model for changing your eating habits. I ranked them based on the importance for your health measures, and it's important that you go in that order. For example, number 6, eating more grains is great. But if you haven't done number 1, getting rid of the processed food, it's not going to matter much that you're eating a lot of salad. So, number one, stop eating processed food. Just quit. It's not even food. If it wasn't once alive, it's not food. Number two, stop drinking calories. Soda, coffee drinks, sweet tea, alcohol, liquid calories, zero nutrients. Stop. Number three, learn what's best when eating out and choose the best option. Y'all, we live in 2017. You are going out to dinner. There is no reason on the planet that you cannot look at that menu online ahead of time and plan what you're going to eat. There's no reason to get there and say, oh, the only choice I had was chips and queso, a grande margarita, and a cheese quesadilla. That's all they had. No, it's not. There's a best option no matter where you go. You have to choose the best option consistently. Number four, keep your sugars below 20 grams a day. Yep, that means tracking your diet. I'll say it till the day I die. If you don't track the food you eat, you have no idea what you're putting in your body. No idea. Most people that start tracking their food are blown away by the amount of carbohydrate they're eating. Sugar below 20 grams a day. That's a separate spot on the label. So yes, you can. Keep tracking your head. Number five, eat your greens and crucifers every single day. There is not a day in your life that should go by without eating something green. Number six, stop eating grains. I could do 6 hours on grains alone. Y'all, grains are just something we need to stop. But it's number six. If you can't do the other ones, do your best, but do this in the steps. Number seven, add the healthy fats. So those are the animal fats, the good natural sources of fats, not the fake fats. Once you got all that down, double dog dare, keep your total carbohydrates less than 100 to 150, depending on where you're starting and what your goals are. And then if you can do that, let's try to keep that protein down to 3 to 4 ounces a meal, right? We don't want to eat 8 to 10 ounces of protein because what happens to excess protein? It's stored as fat on the body. And then number 10, keep lowering your carbs until you see results. So if you're not getting anywhere and you're already doing 1 to 9, you might need to get those carbs down even more. For me, if my carbs are above 50, I'm packing it on. It's not fair, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. So, knowledge helps us. The psychology of change. So, here's our last myth. It takes 21 days to create a new habit. We've all heard that, right? That's just not true, guys. I'm being honest. The fact is, it depends on the degree of change desired and the length of time the undesirable habit has been in place. Research shows it takes 30 to 90 days on average for food-related changes. But most important is that you're never, ever going to succeed if you quit halfway through. So, I really regret eating healthy today, said no one ever. Seriously, you have nothing to lose. Take some time and work through the planning sheet questions. Make an appointment with me or someone else to talk about your plan. Enlist the support of friends and reach out when you're struggling. Better nutrition leads to a better quality of life. There's just no arguing that. Next time, we're going to talk about weight loss in more detail, weight loss specifically. And then coming up soon, we're going to have a little bit more on disease prevention and even reversal of symptoms. Those are scientific, yes, but you'll get a lot more details on those topics. So thank you so much for listening today. I know it's hard to take some time out of your day, and I really hope you got something out of it. So come back next time, and we'll focus on weight loss in more detail. In the meantime, let me know if you have any questions. Bye.